Hey guys, welcome back. This week is episode 6 of my Fat History series. If you're new here, hello and welcome to Fat History. It's where we tell stories about cool fat people throughout history. Because there's always been fat people doing cool and interesting things, their stories just never get told. So I'm here to tell those stories with the respect and the dignity that they deserved all along. In honor of the upcoming holiday, today is going to be an extra special Halloween episode. I can't think of anyone who would be a better person to talk about than the absolute iconic filth queen herself, Divine.
Look,
The star of Pink Flamingos is here again. It's Divine.
If you've never heard their story, I am very, very excited to share it with you today. She was a counterculture fat icon, and she inspired iconic pieces of pop culture history that if you're watching this video, I would be willing to bet you've almost certainly seen.
Now, then, you're here because you have a thing. Not that I blame you.
If you like these videos and want to see more, I have a list about a mile long of people I want to talk about, and I'm going to be putting out videos each week, so feel free to subscribe for your weekly dose of fat history. Before we get started, I do want to mention something just real quick. While this is a super interesting story, I would definitely proceed with caution when looking up the movies. They're definitely not meant for anyone that's underage. Even for adults, they're really shocking, so I would recommend looking up a summary of the movie before you watch it, just so that you know what you're getting yourself into. Got it? Okay, cool. Let's get started. Divine, aka Harris Glenn Milsteed, was born October 19th, 1945, in Baltimore, Maryland, to a conservative middle-class family. When describing his upbringing, Divine recalled, "I was an only child in, I guess, your upper middle class American family. I was probably your American spoiled brat." At age 12, Divine and his parents had moved to Lutherville, which is a suburb in Baltimore. This is where he would spend the rest of his high school years, and they were not good years. People would treat him really poorly because of his weight and his perceived femininity. In 1963, he started at the Marinella Beauty School, where he learned hairstyling. After that, he would go on to work at a couple of salons around town. He specialized in the creation of beehive and other updo hairstyles. Eventually, he gave up his job, and for a while, he was supported financially by his parents. They catered to his very expensive taste in clothes and cars. They reluctantly paid the bills that he ran up, financing lavish parties, where he dressed in drag as his favorite celebrity, Elizabeth Taylor. In the mid-1960s, he would meet and become friends with John Waters. They were the same age and from the same neighborhood. They only lived a couple of houses away from each other. They both embraced Baltimore's counterculture and underground elements, so they quickly became friends. He described Divine as the girl next door, almost. They started hanging out at a beatnik bar downtown, where they associated with hippies, smoked marijuana, and bonded into what was described as a family of sorts. They were punk rock before punk rock even existed. It was during this time that John would give him the name Divine. John was an aspiring filmmaker intent on making the trashiest motion picture in cinema history. And with Divine as his muse, he would absolutely achieve that goal. Their group of friends were known as the Dreamlanders, and they would all star in low-budget productions on Sunday afternoons. Following the production of his first short film, Hag in a Black Leather Jacket in 1964, Waters began working on his second work, Roman Candles, in 1966, which would be followed by his next film, Eat Your Makeup, in 1968. In this film, Divine is in drag and is portraying Jackie Kennedy at the assassination, which had happened 2 years before they filmed it. She turns to kidnapping models and forces them to eat their own makeup. In an interview, John said that they shot the assassination scene in front of his house, but they didn't tell his parents what scene that they were shooting that day. And so if you can imagine, just going to look out your window and just seeing that in your front yard. John's parents were super supportive though. Even though they're described as like very typical suburban parents of the time, they were still really supportive of all of John's weirdness, which I like to think is really precious. Divine, on the other hand, kept his involvement with Waters and those early underground films that they were creating secret from his conservative parents. He believed that they just wouldn't understand, and so he just didn't tell them. And they actually wouldn't find out about it for a long time. And not long after that, in the summer of 1968, he would move out of his parents' house and get an apartment of his own. Soon after that, Waters would begin filming a full-length motion picture called Mondo Trasho. Divine stars as one of the unnamed main characters, who drives around town and runs over a hitchhiker. In one scene, an actor was required to walk along the street naked, which was super illegal at the time, so it led to the arrest of Waters and almost the entire crew working on the film. Divine, though, escaped by literally driving away when the police showed up to arrest everybody. In 1970, Divine officially quit being a hairstylist and opened up a vintage store in Provincetown. He called it Divine Trash, which I think that is the cutest name for his store. I love that so much. But it wouldn't last long because he didn't actually get the permits to run the business, so he ended up having to move to a different location before realizing that it really wasn't working out financially. He ended up closing the store and selling everything off super cheap, even sold the furniture from his furnished apartment to make some extra money, which ended up with him having a warrant for his arrest. To avoid getting in trouble, he left and went to San Francisco, which had a large gay subculture that really attracted Divine because they were starting to embrace their sexuality. After spending some time there, Divine would return to Baltimore to participate in Waters' next film, the infamous Pink Flamingos.
Give me more questions.
Divine, are you a lesbian?
Yes, I have done everything.
Could you give us some of your political beliefs?
Kill everyone now. Condone first-degree murder. Advocate cannibalism. Eat shit. Filth are my politics. Filth is my life. Take whatever you like.
Yes.
How's this for a center spread?
Oh,
Christ almighty.
It was designed by Waters to be an exercise in poor taste, and it would go on to be considered one of the most outrageous movies that has ever been made. They would even give out puke bags at the door with your ticket because so many people were made physically sick by watching this movie. It really pushed back against the Liberation era gay politics of the 1970s because back then you were really expected to be like nice and try to fit in as much as possible. And so they wanted to do the exact opposite of that. It is pure camp. It invites you to step into their world and you find yourself rooting for them despite or even because of their filthiness. It's also heavily influenced by the Manson trials that were going on at the time. It was in fact so shocking that it was initially banned in Switzerland and Austria. So the long story short version of the plot, Divine plays Babs Johnson, a woman who claims to be the filthiest person alive.
As Divine proves that not only is she the filthiest person in the world, she is also the filthiest actress in the world.
And is forced to prove her right to the title from challengers Connie and Raymond Marble. The overall theme of the movie is to stay true to yourself, but the way that they get there is through hilarious and shocking scenes that will literally have you thinking, how in the world did this movie get made?
Eggman here. I'm starving to death for some eggs. Please, Babs, come in and give me some eggs.
The final scene, though, is really what gets people. Babs eats an actual dog poop. Like, followed a dog around for 3 hours, and then in one continuous scene, eats the dog poop. Like, it really happened. And it's shot in one continuous clip, so that there is no way that anybody could possibly say that it wasn't real. This scene would become one of the most notable moments of Divine's career and film history to this day. She initially thought that John was joking about the scene.
John came to me and he said, would you do this? I said, oh, sure.
Come over here.
Well, I thought he was kidding. A year later, he said, okay, now tomorrow you have to eat the dog turd. I thought, oh, this is great. He wasn't kidding, And he said, well, listen, do you want to be famous?
People would literally run out of the theaters vomiting, which they would consider a standing ovation. It was so gross and bizarre and shocking, it drew people in like a circus attraction. It was so popular that they said that they had a line around the building for 5 years. And there was no advertising. It didn't need it. Word of mouth was more than enough.
The word of mouth spread, and then it spread all over the country, as my father later said, yeah, like cancer.
Their budget was next to nothing, so their margin for error was almost non-existent. There wasn't even any scene editing, so they would just have to memorize pages and pages of dialogue and get it right the first time, including when they burned down a trailer, which is funny because they told all the neighbors that they were coordinating with local fire department, which was definitely in no way true. The film premiered in 1972 at the 3rd Annual Baltimore Film Festival, where it sold out 3 shows. After this, it would be picked up by the company New Line Cinema, who was really just a small independent company at the time, and it would be distributed to the owner of the Elgin Theater in New York City. Which, if you don't know what that is, it's a theater where a lot of other movies gained their cult following at the time. It would have these late night shows called Midnight Movies, and it's where young people would go to watch movies like Reefer Madness and Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I knew the Elgin was the place to open it in New York. It was the Radio City Music Hall of midnight movies.
When the filming of Pink Flamingos was done, Divine would return to San Francisco, where he and Mink Stoll starred in a number of low-budget plays as part of a drag troupe called The Coquettes. In 1974, Divine would again return to Baltimore to film Waters' next motion picture, Female Trouble.
The star of Pink Flamingos is here again. It's Divine. She's got balls, and she's got female trouble.
I'm a thief and a shit kicker, and I'd like to be famous.
In this movie, he played a teenage delinquent named Don Davenport, who embraces the idea that crime is art and is eventually executed by electric chair for her violent behavior.
And I'm so fucking beautiful I can't stand it myself!
And just like with Pink Flamingos, even though her character does these vile and deplorable things, the real villains are the characters who lie about who they are. Female Trouble would be one of Divine's favorite movies to film because it allowed him to play both a male and a female character. And playing male characters was something that was really important to him because he didn't want to be typecast as just a female impersonator. In 1981, Divine would star in Waters' next film, Polyester. The film was released in Odorama, which means that it came with these cards for the audience to smell at key points in the film. So like it would say 2, and so you would scratch off 2 and you'd smell it, and it would correspond with whatever was going on in the scene. This would also be the first of their movies that was wholesome enough to receive an R rating. It was that same year that Divine decided to get back in contact with his estranged parents. His mother had learned of his cinematic and his disco career when reading an article about the films of John Waters in Life magazine. Throughout the rest of the 1980s, Divine took his musical performances on tour across the world, which was particularly successful in Europe. After that, Divine would star in a couple of other films, such as Lust in the Dust and Trouble in Mind. After this, he would become involved in the next John Waters production, which would be the movie Hairspray. Hairspray revolved around the self-proclaimed, pleasantly plump teenager Tracy Turnblad as she pursues stardom as a dancer in the local television show and rallies against racial segregation. As with the movie Female Trouble, Divine got to take on 2 roles of the movie, a male and a female character. The first of these was Edna Turnblad, Tracy's mother. Divine later noted that with this character, he couldn't accurately be described as a drag queen. What drag queen would allow herself to look like this? I look like half the women from Baltimore. His second character in the movie was that of the racist television station owner. In one interview, he talked about how he had hoped to play both Tracy and her mom, but the producers wouldn't go for it and hired Ricki Lake instead. Divine went on to state his opinion on Ricki Lake. She's 19 and delightful. I hate her. In reality, though, they had become really good friends. Reviews of the film were predominantly positive. This film would go on to be remade in 2007 with an absolute iconic cast. You've got Zac Efron, Amanda Bynes, Queen Latifah, and Nikki Blonsky, just to name a few. And Divine's character was played by John Travolta. This was the version of Hairspray that I was actually first introduced to. It came out when I was still in high school. And as a loud, fat teenager with black hair and straight bangs, you could say I definitely identified with Tracy's character in like several different ways. So that movie specifically is really dear to my heart. On March 7th, 1988, 3 weeks after Hairspray was released nationwide, Divine was staying at the Regency Plaza Suites Hotel in Los Angeles. He was scheduled to tape a guest appearance on the TV show Married with Children the following day. After spending all day at the studio for rehearsal, Divine returned to the hotel that evening, where he dined with friends at the hotel restaurant before returning to his room. Shortly before midnight, Divine passed away in his sleep. The funeral would take place at Prospect Hill Cemetery, where a crowd of hundreds gathered to celebrate his life. In what's become kind of a tradition, fans have been known to leave makeup, food, and graffiti to pay their respects. In 1989, after Divine had passed away, she would actually become the inspiration for Ursula the Sea Witch in the Disney animated film, The Little Mermaid. It's really not hard to see her influence on the character. Everything from her hair to her body, even how she carries herself and her mannerisms, they're all very divine.
And don't underestimate the importance of body language.
They had originally wanted to go with a more slender look for the character until they tried using Divine as their inspiration, and then the character was born. While Divine would never actually get to see the movie, I had a feeling that she would have absolutely loved to be the inspiration for such a vile and evil villain for a kids movie. From Filthy Bitch to Sea Witch, Divine is easily one of the most beloved people in queer history. She wasn't just a drag queen. She represented the counterculture within the counterculture. She was the goddess of gross, the big bad mama of midnight movies, a Miss Piggy for the blissfully depraved, a testament to what can happen when you truly believe in yourself, filth and all. It's also a perfect example of just how far fat people can go in this world when they have people who actually believe in them. I hope you've been inspired by her story in the way that it's inspired me. I hope you take the message to heart. You deserve to live your most authentic life and to follow your dreams. Let me know down in the comments if you've seen any of her movies before, or if you would eat a dog poop for fame and fortune. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. I'm having so much fun with this series, and I'm really excited to show you guys who we're going to talk about next. And I hope to see you next week. If you want more content before then, I'll have links to my other social media accounts in the description. If you have any suggestions, or if there's anyone that you want to see me talk about, feel free to send me a message on Instagram. I hope you guys have a very safe and happy Halloween. And until next week, stay filthy. Bye!
I'm a thief and a shit kicker, and I'd like to be famous.
Dawn Davenport is eating a meatball sandwich right out in class.
Here she is, Divine as Dawn Davenport, a feisty young high school girl.
My parents are going to be real sorry if I don't get them cha-cha heels.
Nice girls don't wear cha-cha heels.
Give me those presents. I don't need to wear those ugly shoes. I told you not to love them.
Yes,
If they're smart, they're queer. And if they're stupid, they're
watch as Divine performs the most perverse acts ever brought to the screen.